Dozens of federal agents surrounded an apartment building in Chicago's South Shore neighborhood this morning. The area is bracing for a potential military deployment as immigration officials conduct raids.
Local leaders tonight are also demanding answers after an immigration raid.
The federal immigration officials say they have no plans to end their immigration.
Chicago has just witnessed one of the largest immigration raids in recent history, an operation whose impact was felt across the entire city. In the early morning hours of September 30th, 2025, federal agents stormed an apartment complex in Chicago's South Shore neighborhood in a sweeping crackdown that left residents stunned. Witnesses described convoys of black SUVs filling the streets, helicopters circling overhead, and tactical teams in gas masks moving with military-style precision. By the time the sun rose, at least 37 people had been taken into custody. This was no routine immigration stop. According to federal officials, the raid targeted drug trafficking, weapons crimes, and immigration violations, all linked to a Venezuelan gang that had been slowly embedding itself within Chicago's communities. The warnings from the Department of Homeland Security and ICE were chilling. This wasn't about protests or low-level offenses. This was the expanding footprint of Tren de Aragua, a transnational criminal syndicate that began in Venezuela's prisons and has since spread into American cities. The focus of the operation was an alleged network tied to Tren de Aragua, with activity concentrated inside the South Shore neighborhood. Federal sources revealed that the 5-story apartment building at the center of the raid had effectively been overtaken by undocumented immigrants connected to narcotics and gang operations. Prosecutors identified at least 6 high-priority targets, all suspected members accused of trafficking drugs, smuggling weapons, and exploiting vulnerable migrants for profit. According to DHS officials, this was far from an improvised action. The raid was the culmination of months of surveillance, wiretaps, and intelligence gathering that identified the building as a hub for both gang activity and immigration violations. The agency later confirmed that the operation, codenamed Operation Midway Blitz, was one of the largest immigration enforcement efforts in recent years. But beyond the arrests, its mission carried a deeper message. Foreign criminal networks would not be allowed to take root in U.S. cities without consequence. The sequence of the raid explains why it shook the community so deeply. It began around 1 a.m., when federal convoys blocked the surrounding streets and tactical teams moved door to door through the apartment complex. Agents from ICE, Border Patrol, the FBI, and ATF surrounded the structure and breached multiple units simultaneously. Flashbang grenades exploded in the hallways, while drones equipped with cameras scouted rooms before officers entered. Children were escorted out of apartments as their parents were zip-tied and led away. Neighbors who watched from their windows said the scene looked less like an immigration raid and more like a battlefield. By sunrise, dozens had been detained. Suspects were loaded into unmarked vans, and the entire building had been cleared from top to bottom. For the residents of South Shore, it was a night they would not soon forget. For federal officials, it marked only the beginning of a larger campaign aimed at dismantling Tren de Aragua's growing presence in the United States. By the time the dust settled, 37 arrests were confirmed, including 6 high-priority targets and dozens of others held on immigration charges. DHS reported that the operation's purpose was twofold: to dismantle the gang's criminal infrastructure and to remove individuals unable to verify legal residency in the U.S. Among those arrested, some now face immediate deportation, while others have been charged with narcotics trafficking, weapons offenses, and conspiracy. Prosecutors emphasized that none of these individuals were detained by chance. They were all suspects repeatedly identified through intelligence briefings, surveillance logs, and connections to Tren de Aragua's criminal web. The raid was part of a broader campaign under Operation Midway Blitz, which has already resulted in more than 800 arrests across Illinois. But for Chicago, the scale of the South Shore operation revealed something much larger: that one of the world's fastest-growing transnational gangs had quietly established a foothold within the city. Tren de Aragua is not a gang that originated in U.S. neighborhoods. It was born inside Venezuela's prison system, where inmates transformed a violent inmate organization into a sprawling criminal empire. Over time, it expanded across South America, from Colombia and Chile to Peru, before reaching the United States. Officials now warn that its expansion mirrors the early spread of MS-13, embedding itself within migrant communities, blending into urban areas, and exploiting vulnerable populations as both recruits and victims. In Chicago, investigators linked Tren de Aragua to a range of crimes: including armed robberies, drug trafficking, extortion, and violent turf disputes concentrated on the city's south side. Intelligence assessments described the group as opportunistic and brutal, using threats and extortion to control migrant labor, forcing women into prostitution, and smuggling drugs across state lines. Their operational model is straightforward: use migration routes as cover, set up bases inside immigrant neighborhoods, and quietly expand under the radar of local law enforcement. Federal authorities now believe that Chicago has become one of several U.S. hubs for the gang's growing influence. Inside the South Shore apartment building, agents uncovered evidence linking suspects to narcotics and weapons distribution, confirming that the property served as both a safe house and a logistical center for the gang's network. As the investigation continues, federal officials warn that Tren de Aragua's expansion is far from over. The South Shore raid may have marked a turning point, but for many, it's a sign that the battle against one of the world's most dangerous criminal organizations has only just begun. While DHS has not yet released a full inventory of what was recovered, officials confirmed that the raid is tied to ongoing federal investigations involving smuggling networks and cash couriers laundering profits through Chicago's immigrant corridors. The weapons connection, however, is particularly alarming. Sources close to the investigation revealed that certain units in the South Shore building were used to store firearms, while others served as packaging hubs for narcotics distribution. This dangerous combination, drugs and weapons under one roof, is precisely what made the location a high-priority target for federal agents. For law enforcement, the operation was more than just an enforcement action. It was proof that Tren de Aragua was not a rumor or an exaggerated name whispered in intelligence briefings. It was real, active, and operating in plain sight. The impact on the neighborhood was immediate and devastating. Doors were kicked in, apartments ransacked, and personal belongings scattered across floors. Residents described being jolted awake by explosions and the heavy thud of boots echoing through hallways. Some families said their children were terrified as masked agents shouted commands and dragged suspects from their homes. At least one U.S. citizen reported being mistakenly zip-tied and detained before later being released. A moment that fueled debates about due process, mistaken identity, and collateral damage. Still, not everyone in the community condemned the operation. Many residents had long suspected something criminal was happening inside the building. For months, they'd complained about constant noise, strange visitors at all hours, and unexplained gatherings. While the raid shocked them, it also validated their fears, confirming that an international gang like Tren de Aragua had indeed taken root in their neighborhood. For South Shore, the event became both a moment of reckoning and a painful reminder that organized crime was not a distant problem. It was already part of their daily reality. Federal officials were quick to defend the operation, emphasizing that this was not a random sweep, but a calculated enforcement action built on months of intelligence work. DHS clarified that surveillance teams had been monitoring the building for weeks, tracking movements, logging visitors, and gathering evidence through informants who reported ongoing drug activity. Every warrant, they said, was meticulously prepared to withstand legal scrutiny. ICE described the raid as surgical, stating that the intent was never to terrorize the community, but to remove individuals who posed clear and immediate threats to public safety. "We will not allow foreign gangs to exploit migration pathways and endanger American neighborhoods," a DHS spokesperson declared. Officials also confirmed that advanced surveillance technology, including facial recognition systems and drones, was deployed to verify that the individuals targeted were indeed those identified in prior investigations. For federal authorities, this operation was about more than just arrests. It was about sending a message. Tren de Aragua is firmly on the radar of U.S. agencies, and law enforcement will strike decisively whenever its presence is detected. Yet the reaction on the ground was sharply divided. Some residents expressed relief, saying the raid finally brought peace to a building they had long feared. They described feeling safer, calling it a long overdue action. But others condemned the militarized tactics, describing them as traumatizing and excessive. Civil rights groups decried the sight of frightened children being pulled from their homes and families separated overnight. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker criticized the operation as heavy-handed, while Chicago's mayor accused federal agents of bypassing local authorities to stage what they described as a political spectacle. Lawsuits are already being prepared, alleging constitutional violations, excessive force, and unlawful detention. The fallout from the operation, many predict, could last far longer than the raid itself, reigniting debates over how far federal immigration enforcement should go in cities that identify as sanctuaries. Despite the criticism, DHS officials have framed the raid as both a victory and a warning. 37 arrests in one night may not dismantle Tren de Aragua, but it sends a powerful signal. Their movements are being tracked, their networks mapped, and their safe havens exposed. Officials have compared the threat to the early rise of MS-13, warning that, if left unchecked, Tren de Aragua could follow the same trajectory, embedding itself deeper into migrant communities, recruiting aggressively, and turning quiet neighborhoods into hubs for organized crime. Already, Tren de Aragua's presence has been confirmed in Florida, Texas, New York, and Illinois. Chicago, they say, is simply the latest front in a much larger battle. For now, Operation Midway Blitz has slowed the group's momentum, dismantling one of its key U.S. bases and stripping away manpower that had gone unnoticed for too long. But federal officials admit that the war is far from over. The gang adapts quickly. Its leaders remain at large, and new recruits continue to arrive through migration channels every month. The conclusion is grim but clear. The fight against Tren de Aragua has only just begun. Unless law enforcement maintains pressure at this scale, the Chicago raid will not be remembered as the end of the problem, but merely the opening chapter in a long and dangerous struggle against one of the most ruthless criminal syndicates now operating on U.S. soil.